Hi guys, welcome to Pixel Affair. It's Kobe here, and in today's video we are going to go deep on morphing one object into another. So this video, I did this video on Cinema 4D Inheritance Effector, and I explained how it works. But in there I showed this particular scene where a text X was morphing into O, and I brushed through it. I didn't go deep exactly how I did it step by step. And in the comment section I got a lot of questions about how I did stuff. So for instance, someone asked how if I can do it step by step, and there were other questions of how I do certain things, how I did certain things in there, and even someone asked if I could do it with multiple, move from like A to B to C and all of that. So we are going to see how we will do this particular scene, morphing from one object to another. It could be any object. It could be any object. But in this case, you are going to use text. That's even make it very obvious, but you could use any object. So with that said, let's actually get into Cinema 4D and see how we would do something like that. So I have Cinema 4D, and this is Cinema 4D R25 open, but this can work in almost every Cinema 4D version that has Mograph in it. Right? So I'm sure whatever version you use, you can follow along. So let's go ahead and start. So I'll first go ahead and create my text. And in here I'll type in X, right? I'll middle align it. So this is my X created. The next thing is we are going to create the first matrix object. So I'll come into let me come here, Mograph, and I'll choose matrix, right? And in the matrix I'll change it from grid to object. Now one thing I've actually realized is that in the latest versions of Cinema 4D, like R25 and upwards, ideally, when I drag and drop the text in here, it should be able to clone on it, but it's not working. So what I'll do is I'll put the text in a connect object. So I'll come into my object, which is found here, but in previous version it might be up here. So I'll select connect, and I'll make the text a child of the connect. So now I'll put the connect rather where the matrix is asking for object. I'll put the connect rather there, and now you can see we have matrices cloned on the text. So if I select the matrix, you can see if you count down here, the count is set to 20, so we can bump it up to any amount that we want. And because it's matrix 6, you are seeing these cubes, but this cube don't really render. It's just some points in space, so it's not geometry. So you can actually bump it up to, let's say for now, let's do something like 5,000, and it will be faster because it's not geometry, so you can render faster. So now the cubes are the matrix is quite big, so we don't see it well. So what I'll do is I'll select the matrix and I'll come to the transform, and you can see the S in the scale. I'll make it just 0.1, do it 0.1 as well. So I'll do it 0.1 as well. So you can see now the matrices are small so that we can see it. I can go ahead and I'll name this connect object X, and I'll hide it. So now we've created our first X. If I come into the text, I can actually change the font size. I'll make it a bit bold. Yeah, so now we've created our first X, and now we've created our matrix. Now let's go ahead and create the next object, which is the O. So we can simply go ahead and follow the process again, come into here and create our text and type in O and all of that. But what I'll prefer to do is I'll duplicate this. So if I select the X, hold Control and click and drag, it will duplicate a copy here, right? So I simply come in here and I'll change the text from X to O. Now I will hide it so that we see what we are doing. So I'm hiding the O. So this is O in here, right? So now that we have the O, we have to create a matrix for the O. So I'll actually name this matrix X matrix, right? And I'll name this one O, right? So let's also, if we can hold the Control and click and drag, or we can simply select it, come to edit, copy, and say edit, paste. You can use Control C, Control V to edit, copy here. So Control C and edit, paste. I didn't do paste at first. And here we have it. So you can see we have another matrix in here, right? So what you have to do is to now, with this matrix, you come into its object, and now you can drag in the O in there. You can see now the O2 has its matrix. So now I'll name this matrix O, so that you see the difference, right? I can go ahead and hide the O geometry because we wouldn't need it for now. Then I'll bring my matrices down. So these are the 2x and O matrices. So what I can do is I'll select the O geometry with the, which is the connect, and I'll move it to this side, and I'll select the X and move it to this side so that we see the difference. So what you are going to do is now use the inheritance effector, and you can use it on either of these matrices, so either the O or the X, right? It doesn't matter. So what I'll go ahead and do is I'll hide the O matrices, I'll hide it, and now we have just the X, right? So with the X matrix selected, when I come to Mograph effector, I can choose inheritance effector, right? And now in the inheritance effector, if I come to effector tab, you can see in the inheritance mode it's set to direct, and there we have object. So it's asking us which object do you want these matrices to inherit. So I'll simply say you should inherit the O matrices, right? And nothing happens. That's because down here you can see morph motion object. Immediately I check it and see now my X, all the matrices of the X has moved to inherit the position of the matrix of the O, right? So if I in this reduce the strength, you can see it's forming back to the X, and if I increase it, it's forming back to the O. That's basically all that I did. So the next is maybe I'll bump up the matrices to probably I'll select the 2 and I'll make it like 50,000, and because it's matrices, it's quite fast, so the viewport is still, you know, responsive and everything. So now to make it morph, we don't want to use the strength directly like that, so we will use fields. So with the inheritance selected, I come to fields, which is the same as fall off in older versions. I come to my fields and I'll choose, let's say, linear field. So with the linear field, you can see if I move it, now it's forming from X to O, right? I'll make it a little bit smaller, yeah. And now if I move it, it's moving from X to O, but I don't want it to, you see, look, it moves too linear. So what I'll do is I want it to have a bit of random in it. So with the inheritance selected, you come to the fields again, and we can create another field which is random, right? And what I'll do with the random is I'll change the blend mode to overlay, and now it gives it a little bit of randomness when it's moving. So that's basically all I did to create the X morphing into O, or it could be the other O morphing into X, right? I mean, you can go ahead and add a lot of stuff to make it more interesting and stuff, but this is basically what I did to make this morph from X to O. So now after you are done with this, how to get it to render? You know what, first of all, let's actually talk about how, let's say, you can make it morph from X to O, and let's say O to maybe A. So let me go ahead and let's create another one. So with the O selected, I'll, like I did first one, I'll hold Control, click and drag to get a copy of the O connect object, and I'll name it, let's say, A, right? Let me unhide it so that you see it. So I'll name it A so that everything looks clean. I'll come into the text and I'll change it from O to A, and now we have another text which is A. So it means you have to create another matrix, right, for the A. So now I'll same way that I'll take the X matrix. I mean, actually, let me take the O rather, which that, because that doesn't have the inheritance. So I'll take the O matrix. I'll hold Control to drag it down, and it creates another one. I'll change the name to A, right? And now with the A, what I have to do is to put in the A object, so that now if I unhide it, you can see we have A as well. So let's move the A to the side here, And now let's go ahead and hide the A geometry or the A text itself. So you have another matrix. So how do we morph from let me select this one. So how do we morph from X to O to A, right? And that's what we are going to do. But with that, it means now we have to also give this particular matrix object, because we want the O to morph to A, right? So now it means that we have to select the O matrices and now come to our Mograph vectors inheritance and now create another one. So this, I'll call this inheritance X inheritance, so that you see the difference. So X inheritance, and now this one is going to be O for the O, so O inheritance, right? And now with the O inheritance, it will ask us, let's come into the effector tab, it will ask us which object do we want the O to morph to. So we can say we want it to morph to the A. So now we drag in the A, and now you can simply actually, it's not the A text but the A matrix. Now immediately we drag in the A matrix, you can see it's telling us morph, so morph object, and you can see now it has morphed to the A. If I hide the A matrices, we have A. So now what's happening is that if I select the first linear field for the X inheritance and I morph, you can see it's morphing from X to A. It's not morphing from X to O, it's morphing from X straight to A, and that's because the O is set to the strength is set to 100%. So now the O itself is morphing into the A. So when this one is looking for something to inherit, it will inherit wherever the positions of the O matrices are. So it will go straight to the A. So first of all, you have to select the inheritance of the O and come to it, and in there we can add its own, let's say linear field as well, right? And maybe bring it down here. Let's first of all select this one, and now you can see it morphs into the O, and now you can select the O's linear field, and now that one will morph into the A, right? So you can go ahead and apply the same random on top of it and say overlay to give it that randomness. So it means that you have to use two different linear fields. So this one will be for the X and this one will be for the O, right? So now if I move this one, you can see it's moving straight to the X, or if I move the down one, which is for the O, you can see it's morphing to the O. So that's how, if you want to do three different objects, you do it. So you need two different inheritance for three different objects, and you can do it for several objects, and that means you have to create several inheritance effectors. So let's see. So you see we morph into X, and now morph into O, and now we can morph into A. All right, but let's go back to the previous one. So I'll delete this ones, and I'll delete the A geometry. So you just want this particular one, and now that I've shown how you do something like this. It could be any object. I'm using text, but it could be any object, characters, it could be moving object, anything that you can actually create matrices on. You can use the inheritance to morph it into something else. So now the next is, how do you render this? Because the matrices, it doesn't render. So if I should hit render, it doesn't render because it's just point in space or something like that. So how do we get this to render? So the first, if you don't have a third-party plugin or renderer like Redshift or Tin or Arnold or all of that, for Cinema 4D, the way you can render this is to use clone. So what I'll do is I'll come in here, Mograph, and I'll create clone, right? And mind you, the clone, it's on its own also can be used to do this same thing, but just because you want to get speed in the viewport, that's why I use the matrices. But we could directly use the clones to do that. So now that I've created my clones, I'll create a cube, and I'll make it a child of the clone, so that I'll clone on the X matrices, right? So first of all, I'll make the cube smaller. So I'll make it, let's say 5 by 5 by 5, right? And I'll change the mode from grid to object. Now, before I actually put in the X matrices, I make sure it's set to multi instances or render instances so that it will be fast, right? Because there's a lot of clones. So now I can drag and drop in the X matrices. You can see now the clone has all moved, and so now if I hide the matrices of the X, can see now we have our cube in here. Our clones are showing. So if I hit render, and see now we can see it, and you can use different objects, not just cube. You can actually come in here and I'll add something like the platonic. I'll make it smaller, so and I'll drag it and make it a chart. You can use different colors. So let me create one color. I'll make this one, let's say red. You can see we have two different colors. One is red and one is just gray, like that. So this is how, if you want to render, this is how one way you can render it with this default Cinema 4D object or Cinema 4D renderer, right? So I'll go ahead and disable it. Another way you can also render it, but might not be as particles like it is, but you can render is use the volume. So I'll come in here and I'll come into the volume builder. I'll create volume builder, and now I'll make the X child of the volumes, and you can see we are, something is happening, right? I'll reduce the voxel size to something like, say, 1. Or I think here 1 is okay. And now it's still, you can see it's very blobby and everything. But with something like matrices and stuff that are points, if you come in to select the matrix, you can see down here we have radius, right? So I can reduce the radius to something like let's see 5 and see what happens. 5 is okay, maybe 3. Yeah, and everything looks blobby and all that. I can actually increase this one to maybe say 2. And I think we should be fine, right? So now with this one, we can actually mesh it. But before I mesh it, it looks too blobby. So what I can do is I can add smoothness to it. So if I add smooth, you can see now, let's actually reduce this more to 1 and see. Yeah, so it gets you something like a liquidish or something of that sort. So with this, now we can mesh it. Let me come into our volumes and you can use the volume mesher. And now we'll make the volume builder a child of the volume mesher. And now we have a mesh which we can render, right? So if I should move the linear, so I hope it will be interactive. See, it's more forming liquidation, stuff like that. All you can do is you can actually reduce the matrices to probably just 10,000 and see, and it still works, but this time it will be faster. So you can actually play around with the volume. With this one, you just play around with it a little bit and see what you can do to eventually get something cool. All right, so that's another way you can actually play around to get to view it. But if you have the third-party renderer like Redshift or Cycles or Octane, all of them, that probably will be the best way to render it. So with me, I have the Redshift. So what I can simply do is that with the, let me actually set it back to the 50,000 so that we have enough, and actually bump it up more, but let me leave it at 50,000. So it's only the X matrix, right? So if I have Redshift, all I'll do is I'll right click on the matrices and I'll come to my Redshift tag and I'll see Redshift objects, right? And you can see in the Redshift objects, if I come to attributes, we have this, it will give us this particles tab, and I can just change it into one of these. So I can say point instance, and if I bring my Redshift render view and hit render, you can see now straight away it's showing points in here, right? We can also change it not from points but to sphere instance, and it's spheres. If you get very close to it, you can see I can actually add something like a dome light. Let me add a dome light, and I'll click on this, add maybe this texture, and you can see now it's rendering. I don't want the background, but I can increase the brightness to like say 8 so that we see. You can see it's actually spheres in there, right? So this is how you can use Redshift to render the matrix object, and it's not just sphere. You can actually change it to quads, which is like cubes, all right? Or we can actually change it to custom, so we now can actually put in our object. So I can actually come in here and I'll create, say, a torus. I'll make it small, maybe 7. All right, I'll make the torus small, and I'll select the Redshift object tag, and I'll drag in the torus. All right, and you can see now it's rendering the torus for us, and it could be several objects, so it don't have to be one object. So I can actually create, let's say, a cube, right? I'll make it 8 by 8 by 8, and now I'll add it to the select the Redshift object tag, add the cube to it. You can see we have cube and torus in here. Because the cubes are small, I can make it, let's say, 20 by 20, and you can see it's mixed with cubes, so it can be several objects. So I can add spheres and all of that. So that's how you can use how do you call it, Redshift or any third-party object also to render the matrices. So this is basically how I did morphing using one object into another with the inheritance effector and the matrix object, and how exactly I rendered it. You can play along with it to get a lot of interesting stuff. I hope this was useful, and thank you for watching till this point. Please kindly subscribe to support, and I'll see you in the next one.